All right. Is there like a thumbs up that people can do? Can you see, is my screen, well, Dalton, is my screen sharing appropriately? Can you see the title slide?
Yes, yeah, yours is working much better than
And
mine
mine
was.
is, I'm showing the right slide, not the behind the scenes notes. Excellent. Hey, everybody. My name is Nikki Michaelak. Thank you for joining us today. We are going to specifically focus on supporting transition-aged students and young autistic adults as they develop independence in health, in their hygiene, and self-care. This session moves beyond just the early puberty instruction and really does focus on those adult competencies and real world expectations. So, we're going to really talk about these as secondary life skills. Health and self care are not just secondary life skills, sorry. They are truly foundational for their future in employment, in accessing the community, in navigating relationships, and then in safety. So, today we're going to talk about strategies that educators or adults who are working with learners who have autism or autistic can immediately use within your programs. I'm going to share a resource in just a minute, which will pop you out to a Google folder where there's a whole plethora of resources. There are some visuals that we have in this that are being put into a format that could be easily copied. So once I share that QR code, make sure you add that. Dalton, do you share out the any follow-up emails after the webinars? Because I can send you the link and
Yes.
you can put that in. Awesome. Great. Um, so as we're talking about all of these different skills, our lens today is always going to be focusing on dignity, autonomy, as well as skill building. So what I am putting up on the screen right now, I'll give you a moment, is a QR code, and I am um, savvy enough, I could probably drop the link if any of you are on a computer and don't
I'll
have
take care of
access.
that.
Oh, you got it? Thank you. Um, because then you can pop open that QR code and get to where you need to be for resources. So in the folder, I don't think I can, I don't know how to navigate to show you what's in there, but there are lots of different toolkits on teaching a whole plethora of skills related to bodies changing, relationships. There's some curriculum tools, there's some resources for practical strategies. If there's something that you are specifically looking for that is not in there or that we highlight in this webinar today, please, I'll give you contact information at the end. Reach out. We likely have many of these files either on our computer hard drives, not up in the cloud yet, but we will happily share anything that we have that will help teach any of the skills that we're going to talk about today or that you might be experiencing as you're teaching um, puberty, hygiene, self care. So, as we dive in, some of the things that we hope that you walk away with is to be able to identify key health and hygiene competencies that are necessary for young autistic adults to succeed in different environments, such as that work setting in their employment settings, community-based settings, as well as I'll go on to say that it's not only post-secondary. We need to start teaching these skills when students are very young, so in their K through 12 as well as post-secondary settings. We are going to talk about practical autism-informed strategies or autism evidence-based practices to teach and support independent self-care routines. We're going to focus in on how do we support emotional, relational, and protective self-care skills, including boundaries, consent, and digital safety. Those are all different areas that we definitely need to target and talk about, as well as teach. And then we're also going to embed health as well as self-care goals into the students' transition plan, so right into their IEPs, so that we can teach skills related to puberty, hygiene, bodies changing, social navigation to promote adult independence. So, When we think about transition planning, we often focus on employment and community participation, but health and hygiene are deeply connected to all of those outcomes. Employers expect consistent hygiene and professional appearance. Young adults who are navigating relationships really must understand boundaries as well as consent. It's a lifelong skill. Without explicit instruction, um, students may experience social rejection. They're going to likely experience difficulties navigating work expectations or work challenges. And there even may be legal outcomes if we don't teach some of these skills. There's a young man who lived in my neighborhood, and when he was probably 23, 24 years old, he would navigate our neighborhood, community setting, the neighborhood that he lives in, and he would stop in front of people's houses just because he had an idea in his head, and he would people accused of him of being a peeping Tom. So we had to do some education within our community, within our neighborhood, but also teach him what he could do differently so that he might not be thought of as a peeping Tom. There's another young man who lives in our neighborhood as well, and he would go for walks, and he enjoyed looking at individuals' feet. And so we had to teach him that it was not appropriate to walk into somebody's garage and ask them to take their shoes off so that he could take a look at their toes. So there are some pretty important skills that we have to teach because one situation did occur where someone called the police on him. So we want to make sure that our autistic individuals have the skills that they need so that those types of situations don't happen. Oftentimes, many of these skills are assumed, but the individuals we're supporting don't necessarily always pick up on those context cues on their own and truly do need explicit instruction and skills broken down to be able to learn them. So, in whatever setting you're in right now, it truly is our responsibility to ensure that these competencies are addressed proactively as well as respectively. So we're going to talk about different strategies that you can use to teach these skills, as well as ways that you might be able to embed those skills into your instruction and through the student's IEP. So when we think about self-care, it extends far beyond just brushing teeth, which is a very important skill, or taking a shower. For many young adults, self-care includes appropriate emotional regulation, relational awareness, safety skills, and self advocacy. And these are not only skills individuals with autism need to learn, they're important lifelong skills that any individual is going to need to learn to appropriately and safely navigate their community and world. It does involve understanding one's own body. So making sure that we do have an understanding of body parts and the real terminology around those body parts. Right, respecting other people's boundaries. So we need to make sure that we're teaching boundaries and consent. Also being able to recognize unsafe situations. There's many autistic individuals who require direct instruction that their neurotypical peers may acquire just contextually by being in their environment. Oftentimes, also, our neurotypical children receive explicit instruction. They get their sex ed in fifth grade. I have an eighth grader right now who is in a sex ed class, sexual health. And so these are classes that oftentimes are gen ed classes and students experience. But if a student is receiving special education, oftentimes it's skipped over. So by broadening that definition, we truly ensure that transition programs can reflect the realities that students face after graduation. So our goal is not only compliance with routines, but also meaningful independence as well as teaching personal safety. Um, can you guys put in the chat how many of you are teaching skills right now that align with any of these topics that are on the slide? Which ones specifically? Are there ones that you aren't teaching? Beautiful. Glad to hear it. Hopefully, you'll walk away with some new resources that will help you in that teaching. All right. So as we think about hygiene, hygiene is something, a skill that really, really will set a student apart. It is directly connected to employability and workplace success. We do a lot of support for faculty across our campus, and that is something that oftentimes gets brought up is that we have individuals who are in higher ed accessing, classes, and they are not aware that their clothes are dirty, that their bodies are smelly. And so those are skills that are going to separate individuals from one another and really going to set a person apart. So it's really important that we need to make sure to target those. When we think of it through that employer lens, employers really expect consistent grooming. We need to make sure that hygiene is on spot. We need to make sure that those clothes are clean. And then we also have to have awareness of when your body does start to smell, how you can take care of that. These expectations are rarely stated explicitly in job descriptions. I've just been writing a whole slew of job descriptions, and it's not anything that I have ever thought explicitly to write in because it's the way that we operate. However, they do significantly impact social perception as well as job retention. So they're skills that we truly need to focus in on and target. Students may understand hygiene at home, but then struggle to generalize those routines across different environments. We do a training in the summer. It's called the Illinois Experiential Practicum for Autism Workshop. And one of the things that we do is we teach hygiene skills. We work with students of all ages in the K through 12 school system, as well as students who require different support needs. And one of the activities that we do, and we teach teachers how to do this, is we teach them how to set up hygiene sequences or hygiene task organizers. So we will have students after they eat or after snack make sure that they are able to wash their hands, check their face to see if there's any food, or maybe brush their hair. So we will build it into a system for that student, a three-step system that looks different based on the level of support that each student needs. So sometimes that might be in a hygiene bucket. So they might have to go get their bucket and then they can go through those steps. It might be in a bag, but we teach them to go through the process so that they can begin learning those skills. That way they are explicitly being taught, and we're working on generalization because we can take a copy of that system and we can share it at home so that the student can also be independent completing those same tasks in the home environment. So we're also targeting generalization. And when we teach those different steps and systems, those are going to be able to generalize to teaching new skills. So um, teaching hygiene is truly that adult competency rather than just focusing on that childhood shifts and how we approach different instruction. So, our role is to build independence, not dependency on prompts. And we're going to do that through some of those visual systems that we're going to be using. So, some of the different areas that we might want to target are identification of body odor and where is it okay and is it okay to be smelly? Like if you're working out, it's okay. But if we're at work, what do we need to do if our body starts smelling? What do I need to look like? So can I show a picture of what my body should look like when I am going to work or going to school or going out into the community? What are my clothing going to look like? Is it okay if it's wrinkled? Is it okay if there's a dirty spot on it? Or what do I do when I recognize that there might be dirty clothes? A lot of individuals have clothes that they prefer to wear. So then we need to work with them so that they understand that we need to make sure that our clothes are clean. And have a system. We have a young man who works with us and he has his work clothes, and every day when he goes home, he changes into his comfy clothes, which I can say probably many of us also do. But if he had his way, he would wear his comfy clothes, which are t-shirts that he has probably worn for 15 years. And so they have holes in them. They're worn thin in different areas. So he has been taught that he has work clothes that he has to wear to work, and then he can change into his comfy clothes when he gets home. I do the same. We need to focus in on oral hygiene. So, not just brushing teeth, but maybe we need to make sure that we have access to those same tools to be able to brush our teeth at work. If our breath stinks, if we get food in our teeth. So, those are all things that we need to be aware of and have to teach those skills so that they have the skill to be able to take care of that in any environment. And then we're going to focus in on how are we going to transition those skills. Oops, I think I went the, did I go the right way? Nope. Sorry, I'm new to Canva. Okay, so as we really think about how we're going to expand the definition of self-care, because it's going to look different as students age and get older. So self-care extends far beyond just brushing teeth as well as the showering routines. Did I go backwards?
I believe
Maybe
so.
you did. I did. All right, I
Um,
did. I'm sorry.
that's
I,
okay. It can get a little confusing.
there we go. Here we go. So as we think about how we're going to teach some of these skills, many of these are strategies that you are probably already familiar with. Um, you're going to be using these same skills to teach those skills that are associated with puberty, with hygiene, with social interactions. You're going to use these, but in a different way. So many of the same tools that you are probably very familiar with are also going to be the tools that you're going to use to teach the different skills. So we're going to go through some examples of what some of these are and how they can be used to teach. So, as you're thinking of building those independent hygiene routines, you're going to use a task analysis. So, a task analysis is a process where we're going to take a larger skill and we're going to break it down into smaller components. And we're going to teach each of those smaller components using systematic instruction. So, a task analysis can help by breaking hygiene routines into smaller, manageable steps, along with using that task analysis where we've broken down a skill area, we're going to make sure that we supplement and we're going to use visual supports. And those visual supports are going to be specific to each of the learners that you're going to be working with. So for some learners, it might just be a visual checklist. If it's a student who is a reader, then you can write. If it's a student who requires higher support needs, then you're going to take those steps and you're going to present them in a visual manner. And so you can use tools that you may have, such as Symbol Sticks, which is an image library. Another very popular one is Lesson Picks. It's, I think, $36 a year, pretty reasonably costed. And so it's going in and creating those task analyses, identifying visuals or pictures to go with it, and breaking those skills down into smaller components and presenting them in that visual manner. Um, it has been reported that over 90% of individuals with autism are visual learners, and that auditory channel is the weakest link. So, anytime that we can present information visually through a visual strategy, a visual checklist, that is going to increase independence. When we have things in that visual presentation manner, it reduces reliance upon other adults. So then we don't have somebody verbally walking a student through their step. We can instead focus on teaching how to use a visual, which in turn increases independence so students can navigate that independently. Other areas that we're going to think about teaching is through the use of technology. We can teach using alarms in phones. So there are a couple of different apps that can be used. You can use a notes app and make a checklist. And then I love that it has those little bullet check marks that you can cross off. You can also use reminders and stick reminders right into that phone that can be set to be daily. So you can have medication reminders, you can have brushing teeth reminders. So there's certain things that can be built in to the technology, either through an iPhone, other types of phones, phones, or even using iPads and tablet technology. And those are tools that can be used to help reduce adult prompting. Again, the goal is how can we reduce reliance upon an adult and instead use systems or different pieces of technology or visuals so that students can independently navigate those different skills. Fading prompts is another thing that we need to do very intentionally, and that prevents long-term reliance upon staff that are in the student's environment working with them. And then what we really want to do is we want to make sure that we are teaching those routines across settings and really planning intentionally for generalization. So we're going to focus on what does this look like in the home environment? What can we do to teach it in the school environment? And then how can we also generalize it to maybe a work setting that that student is going to be in to truly promote true generalization and set those students up for success. Let me see if I can get that to go the right way now. So, as we start thinking about specific skills that we might be teaching, for individuals who are menstruating, independence requires some very targeted skills. Students may need structured routines for product management so that they know all of the different things that they might need when they go into the bathroom to make sure that they are clean and really focusing in on that hygiene component. For some girls, we're going to be able to teach cycle tracking to help reduce anxiety and then increase predictability of when their period is going to come. There are some pretty cool technology apps now that can help with that to alert that their period may be coming. So, those are some tools that you can look into that have been very, very helpful and successful as we're teaching um, females how to take care when they are getting their periods. We also want to make sure that we're planning for workplace or community settings and how do we navigate those if we get our period in those settings? What do we do? Instruction must prioritize dignity as well as privacy. Um, we're going to talk a little bit later about abuse rates, but we really need to focus on appropriate behavior in public and non-public settings because we have such high rates of abuse. So our goal is for young adults to manage these routines independently. And so there's going to be different systems that we need to put in place that will help navigate. This is a visual about, it's actually a comic strip conversation that can be used to teach about periods. And so this would be something that we want to introduce to a female before she gets her period so that she can expect what's going to happen when it does happen. So it could also include there's going to be blood. There could be a stomach cramping. You might feel bloated. And also, your emotions are going to be perhaps all over the place. So, this is a resource that is in that folder that you could download. If anybody wants the editable file, we're happy to share it and you can um, tweak it so that it meets your learners' needs. When we think about individuals who are moving into adolescence as well as adulthood, there are some very big emotional as well as relational demands that become a little bit more complex. There may be romantic interests. There's going to be friendships that shift. There's going to be workplace relationships, all that are very social and sometimes very hard to navigate. So these may require skills that aren't often explicitly taught. So many of our students have received supports for academics as well as behavior goals, but not too often have we systematically taught how to navigate rejection, how to set boundaries, and really how to understand consent. So we need to really focus on the emotional and relational self-caring components, which recognizes someone's own feelings and recognizing feelings, regulating responses when there is a specific feeling and knowing what I can do to help regulate my own body. And then also engaging in relationships that are safe, that are respectful, and that are reciprocal. We've got to have that reciprocity. It can't just be a one-way thing. And sometimes that's how it is. So we have to break that skill down and teach. Without direct instruction, students may experience confusion. They can also become extremely vulnerable, and they may have a difficult time navigating when there's social conflict. That social component is a lifelong skill and is incredibly hard to navigate. Our role is not to control relationships, but instead to teach the skills that allow young adults to engage in those different things safely as well as independently. So, we're going to talk about some different areas to target as we focus in on emotional and relational self care. Emotional regulation is one of the first areas that we need to target. And this becomes much more complex during adulthood. So there, as I mentioned before, are romantic interests. We have to navigate how to deal with rejection because my feelings may be different. And how do I understand that when someone doesn't want to engage with me in the ways that I want to engage with them? There's also workplace stress, which may also bring different emotional demands. So we need to make sure that we teach what to do when something doesn't go right. Many students have not been explicitly taught how to cope with all of these different experiences, and it's hard to account for all experiences, but we can identify some common situations, and we can teach how to respond based on what those targeted areas are. Without those specific instructions, um, we're going to see emotional responses that may escalate very, very quickly. That is going to impact someone's ability to maintain a job. And that's what's going to set them apart and could impact them maintaining or losing their job. So we really need to teach emotional awareness and coping strategies as a form of self-care. And then we need to focus on how can we structure up and teach those skills as well as practice them, role play, and use modeling. I had to run to the cell phone store yesterday and I was waiting in line, and there was a mom who it was very apparent that something happened to her son's phone, and her son, it sounded like, had been in that store. And the employees were trying to explain that whatever the situation was something that had happened outside of the cell phone store. And I think they were trying to get a repair fixed after the phone had been fixed. It was like they got it fixed, they left, something happened, and they thought it was an error that or something that went wrong with during the fixing process. And the employee was saying, no, when we handed the phone back, it was fine. There were no cracks in it and something must have happened. He may not have known that he broke his phone, but from the sounds of it, the young man, when he came in, he was yelling at the employees. And so this is a common issue with many people, whether or not they have autism, but we need to be aware of our emotions. We have to be able to identify feelings and we have to be able to know how to regulate. And so that is not only a skill that is specific to autistic individuals needing to learn, it's a lifelong skill that everyone could benefit from focusing on how to regulate a little bit better. Another area that we need to focus on is understanding relationships and safety. So, students must learn the difference between a friendship as well as a romantic interest. So, we also need to really focus on consent, and we need to teach that consent needs to be taught clearly and directly. And so we can do that through different visuals. Respecting boundaries is something that protects both individuals as well as others that are in that relationship. So we need to make sure that we focus on boundaries. We need to focus on power dynamics. And when I say power dynamics, what do I mean? Well, think about a work situation and supervisors and support staff, and who do we report to? And so those are different social levels that we need to focus on and teach how to interact with people who have different power levels than us. There's a curriculum, if you're not familiar with it, it's called the hidden curriculum. And that is a skill that we need to teach individuals. Who can I say things to, and who can I not say things to? This is something that I'm working on with my 13-year-old right now. Walking up and farting in my face is probably not something that you should do in front of adults. That might be something, and I don't think that I condone that, that you do with your friends, but there's a place in a group that it may be more okay to do that with. And there's also people that it's not okay to do that with. That could think about how that might relate to a student cursing and swearing. It might be okay to do that with a certain group of people, but when you go and you talk to your boss or you talk to a teacher or you're out in the community with and you're buying something, you probably want to be respectful and use different language. So it's important to teach who it's okay to do certain things with and who it's not. And then we have to focus on how to generalize those skills. So the hidden curriculum is a great tool for being able to teach that. We also want to focus on healthy relationships because, as we know, there's a high rate of abuse. And so we want to make sure that that helps to teach autonomy um, as a skill. Autistic adults, like all young people, may explore and express diverse gender identities as well as sexual orientations. So, gender identity refers to a person's internal sense of being male, female, both, or another identity. Sexual orientation refers to someone who is romantically or sexually attracted to. So, those are different areas that we need to specifically teach, as well as expression, which is your clothing, your hairstyle, your presentation, and how that may or may not align with an individual's identity. Research suggests that individuals with autism report higher rates of gender diversity than the general population. So, oftentimes, if we're not even teaching sex ed, this is completely missed. And so, this is definitely a role that we as educators are not there to determine a student's identity, but we are there to support safety. We're there to support dignity. We're there to support an individual's mental health. So we also have to respect chosen names. We need to make sure that we have identified students' preferred pronouns. And use that as a basic component to promote psychological safety and also relational self-care. So these are all different areas that we might need to target as we're thinking about how we can support individuals. Moving on to focusing on protective care as well as safety. Um, Here's some data for you. So, individuals with disabilities are approximately 2 to 3 times more likely to experience sexual assault than individuals without disabilities. So, a much higher rate. Some studies suggest that autistic individuals experience sexual victimization at rates as it's a range 40 to 90% across the lifespan. That's huge and unfortunate. Um, Particularly women as well as gender diverse individuals. So we have high rates of really scary things. Individuals with developmental disabilities also experience a higher rate of repeated victimization. So, because of that, we truly need to focus on protective self care and then also safety. So, as we move into this section, we're going to ground the discussion based on that data so that we can highlight why it's so important that we target these skills. Since we know individuals do experience significantly higher rates of abuse and exploitation compared to neurotypical peers, we need to make sure that we are focusing on the skills um, so that we can hopefully change that data. What we want to do is we want to make sure that dependence on caregivers, we need to also focus on the social communication differences of individuals, and we need to teach how to interpret different signals and how that could be perceived as an increased risk. So if we don't and we continue to avoid conversations about sexuality or boundaries, that doesn't reduce the the vulnerability, it increases it because we're not explicitly teaching. So we need to make sure that we're equipping young adults with the knowledge and skills to recognize unsafe situations, to make sure that they have the skills to be able to assert their boundaries, and then what to do and how to seek help. So we're going to go through a couple of different areas that are important to target. So we want to make sure that we are teaching skills about what behavior is okay to do in public, what behavior is private behavior. We're going to talk about consent and body autonomy. We're going to talk about grooming and manipulation. We're going to talk about digital safety and exploitation, and then what to do when there are issues. So we know that we can focus on, I think I have a couple of examples up here on how to teach public and private. I'm going to jump ahead really quick. So, depending on the level of support that individuals may need, you might be very specific in how you're going to teach some of these skills. So, you're going to teach what can happen in what environments and make sure that we are explicit in teaching those skills. You might also need to teach where can you do certain things, like where is it okay to touch yourself? When we talk about masturbation, we need to be very explicit that this cannot happen in a public bathroom. You need to be in the safety of your own bedroom or bathroom at home. So there's different strategies that we're going to use to teach those skills that are associated with public and private spaces. And we begin doing that by teaching what is a public space, what is a private space. On here is our two great books, Taking Care of Myself. I think by Mary Roble. That QR code should get you to Amazon, and it's just they're great books to teach. The first one really focuses on teaching hygiene skills and routines from a very young age. And then the Taking Care of Myself too. The first one does address bodies changing, um, so development as well as um, masturbation for females and males, and then taking care of myself too goes even further and it goes into intimacy and relationships. So those are two really great resources, and they do have the strategies on this page and the next are also directly from those books. So there's lots of different resources that you can use and adapt. They have some really great ideas that you can then take and individualize for the individuals that you are working with. Let me go back to the previous slide. Um, so Where Can I Be Naked is another example that teaches the private and non-public. So you're going to use some of those strategies to teach these different behaviors. So we have to teach masturbation for some individuals. So we can do that by breaking that skill down and using different visuals. A lot of those visual libraries, such as Boardmaker as well as Symbol Sticks, do have a sexual health library that you can expand and open and have access to some of those images. We have a lot of these visuals already created, so if this is something that you need, we're happy to share some of those resources. They're not readily available on our website, but if you reach out, and I'll give you that in a little bit, you can we can get you those resources. We also need to make sure that we are identifying behaviors that can happen in those shared living spaces. If an individual is in an apartment or even in their own family home, where can certain things happen so that you know what is okay and what is not okay? This is also important for individuals as they may go into a dorm living space so that they know where they can do certain things and where they cannot. And that changes the privacy expectations. And so those are skills that need to be explicitly taught. We also need to make sure that we identify and also teach those workplace boundaries because that's equally as important. So we need to make sure that we are clear and concrete in all of our teaching and our instruction because that's going to help prevent misunderstanding. So we also want to make sure that we're thinking, there was a situation that you never can think of all of the situations until sometimes they happen. There was a young man who went to get his hair cut by the same hairdresser. Um, and he went back one day and learned that she didn't work there anymore. And he asked where she was working. And he then decided to go to the tanning spa where she was newly employed and asked her for a haircut. And it was a scary situation. Someone thought that it was a stalking situation, but it was a lack of teaching the social skill around I probably should not go to this person's new employment to ask if she could cut my hair. So there's lots of different nuances about all of these different skills that we don't really think about, but would be skills that we need to teach. All right, so moving on, I shared some of these visuals already. This is, I showed you the comic strip conversation for girls. This is a comic strip conversation for some of the changes that boys' bodies might be going through. And so this is a resource that can also be adapted to target different things that might be an issue. So you are welcome to download this, and I can also make sure that you have access to the editable file so that someone could go in and adapt it so that it's usable. Moving on to talking about digital and online safety. Digital environments introduce a significant risk for young adults. This has been an ongoing issue for many, many years now that we are such a digital um, community. So we need to make sure that we are identifying and talking about the risks of sexting, image sharing, social media boundaries, and misunderstandings. All of those things can have very serious consequences. Many autistic individuals interpret online communication very literally and may struggle with some of the nuances that go along with posting. So we need to explicitly teach about digital boundaries. We need to make sure that we don't do this through the lens of being fear-based, but we want to do it from protection and self-care education. We want to make sure that there are skills that are being taught to promote the safety, but also the legalities. There's a great book. It's called Five is Against the Law, and it does relate some of these behaviors to a continuum of what is against the law. So if you haven't seen that book, it's a great one. It not only teaches, it not only is focused on behaviors that could land a student in jail, but it focuses on a broader range of skills that you could teach. As we are looking at how can we support gender diverse students, it may require very thoughtful planning around bathroom use, around locker rooms, as well as privacy. So we need to make sure that there's clear, consistent staff communication that would prevent confusion and protect that student's dignity. We need to make sure that staff avoid using unnecessary disclosure of students' identities. And then we also need to make sure that boundaries are being maintained professionally and neutrally. We want to make sure that we're preventing harassment as a safety obligation for that student. And we want to make sure that we are being very intentional in planning ahead with the intent of reducing some reactive ways or reactive decision making that may cause more issues. So these are additional considerations that you might need to target as you are working with gender diverse students. When we think about healthcare independence, this is another skill area that we need to focus on. We need to make sure that students have time to practice scheduling appointments and then also describing their symptoms. There's some great visuals that are out there that focus on something hurting. So we need them to be able to identify what different parts of their body hurt, which is why it's really important when students are younger or children are younger that we're teaching appropriate body anatomy and labeling body parts with their anatomical name. If it's a student who does take medicine, we're going to want to figure out a medication management plan. Maybe that is setting some of those reminders so that that student is independent, completing and taking their medicines. There's little plastic pill pockets that medication can be put in or the medicine organizers, and those allow students to be independent taking their own medicine. Navigating insurance systems is incredibly confusing and might require some very specific instruction, as well as how to navigate when there is a problem. So those are some skills that are higher level skills, but very important skills to navigate, especially if you have a student who is going to be living independently. Or going to be going away to school because they're going to have to navigate some of that on their own. Some of the things that have been helpful to navigate that are by providing some scripts and then also practicing and role playing to teach those. So you can teach any of these in the school environment or at home. And so thinking of what the different areas might be and then writing some scripts out to specifically focus on teaching those skills. Other areas to focus on are consent, boundaries, and this applies to all different types of relationships. Students should receive instruction that includes same sex as well as gender diverse relationships in a very matter of fact, objective way. Exclusion, when we don't focus on that, it could increase shame, it could increase secrecy, and we don't want that. So we want to make sure that we're also avoiding stereotypes to promote healthier relational understanding. We want to make sure that we're teaching safe dating practices that are inclusive. We want to make sure that our instruction reflects real world diversity so that students are prepared for that adult life. There's some really good curriculums. Mike Crush is one. And it has different videos, it has different scenarios that you can use to teach navigating social relation or so sexual relationships, social relationships. Um, there's also the peers curriculum, and that does a good job focusing on all of the different types of relationships. And then lastly, before we wrap up, I'm going to jump right into what can we do to help secure these skills um, and write them into a student's IEP. So we can align many of these different skill areas with post-secondary goals. We can write and develop measurable IEP objectives. We can make sure that we're promoting independence and focusing on fading prompts so students have these skills. Um, these are health, hygiene, self-care. These are all skills that can be very intentionally built into that student's transition plan. So here are some different areas to target. Um, Hygiene independence can be measured, it can be monitored, it can be written in to that student's day. They can start off by coming into the school and going through some of those hygiene routines. We can focus on consent and digital safety understanding. We can do that through role playing and scenario based instruction. So those can be goals that are written right into that student's IEP. Um, we can focus on healthcare participation, which is identifying and scheduling those appointments. Um, when we focus on these skills and we write them into that student's IEP, then we have consistent, or we should have consistent instruction because we're going to be targeting the skills that are written into the IEP. And though that, and therefore, we are doing a better job of reflecting adult realities because we are also including those targeted skills into the student's IEP. Here is an example of a shaving social story that was used to teach a student how to shave in the school environment. That file should be up in the folder that you can download and adapt if needed. When we think about autistic LGBTQ youth often experience increased bullying, exploitation, as well as significant mental health challenges. So we want to make sure that we are supporting a student's social communication differences as well as the increased identity related stress. We want to make sure that we are teaching boundaries, consent, the same way that we would be teaching navigating any healthy relationship. We also want to make sure that we're doing this to reduce anxiety and increase success with that social interaction. Um, we need to also make sure that schools maintain safety as well as anti-discrimination standards so that our instruction can then focus on safety, on consent, a student's emotional well-being, and not just make it an ideology. So we want to make sure that we are targeting and collaborating with families to make sure that we are addressing all of their needs and skills. When we partner with families, we want to make sure that we have open communication. It prevents the crisis driven conversations that happen. We want to make sure that we are sharing language and the ways that we are teaching these skills so that we can promote consistency of how we're supporting students across all environments. Excuse me. Families may have very different views regarding relationships and sexuality, so we want to make sure that we do ask for their opinions and provide support in the best way that we can. We want to make sure that we are, though, respecting and valuing safety standards and teaching the skills very objectively. Collaboration is key, though. It is also very helpful in increasing success of students and also reducing misunderstandings, especially when we all can be on the same page. So, with just a moment remaining, um, it's important to make sure that we are focusing on health because it impacts independence. All of these are those skills that really focus in on and impact adult competencies. They directly impact employment, they impact relationships, navigating the community, as well as independence. And everything on here must be explicitly taught. We want to make sure that we are providing a safe environment. We are teaching skills so students are gaining very independent, lifelong skills that hopefully reduce the use of abuse and prepare them for the real world. And we can do that also through embedding skills into their IEPs. So we have about 2 minutes remaining. If anybody wants to put in there one self-care skill that your student may need more direct instruction in, you can throw it in there in the chat. And then the last slide I'm going to put up is additional resources, great books to teach skills that are associated with health, hygiene, and self-care. And then in here, I'm going to, in the chat, I am going to put our website. And if you would like any of the resources that were shared, visuals or different visuals that may not have been included, but it would be identified as a skill that you want to teach, there's a contact us on that webpage and it will come to us and we can share any resource that we have.
Thank you so much, Nikki. Uh, and thank you all so much for your active participation during this webinar. I know we're kind of getting close to the time here, but we do have a couple questions in the Q&A and in the chat. So do you have a moment, Nikki?
Absolutely.
Okay, excellent. And if
Happy to stay
while
on.
we're asking these, feel free to drop more. And if you do have to leave, um, this webinar is recorded and will be posted on the ATTA website, and there'll be a link in the post webinar email to access that recording. So, um, first question is, can you repeat the name of the curriculum besides the pairs?
Besides pears, did I say, hold on, I can even show you a picture of it. I brought my books with me. Was it Mike's Crush?
Possible.
So social signals, Mike's Crush. Oh, I've got my blur on. Let me turn that off
Oh.
really quick. So Mike's Crush. And so it is a curriculum that focuses on, it has little videos, and I'm trying to see how I can show you um, what's in it. Uh, lesson one, what is lesson one? Relationships are complex. We'll be learning about healthy and unhealthy relationships. So it talks about relationships. I wonder if there's a better overview here. Here we go. Up here, one focuses on it's an introduction. Okay. Lesson two focuses on appearance matters. Lesson three is on relationships, body language, starting a conversation, getting to know someone, rules and laws, and what does a healthy relationship look like. And so then there are activities that align with each of those different targeted areas. There's videos. Um, I remember looking at this curriculum when we were searching for different curriculums, and they had um, a first date, and they go through different scenarios. One was a first date, one was just you're meeting a friend, and they are all in Starbucks. And so it shows a video, and then you can pause it and you can talk about the different body language, the different things that are happening in the environment to teach different skills and what you should or should not do. So this curriculum we're currently using, we have a really fantastic autism community organization, Autism McLean, and we have some parents of older teens, young adults. I think the group actually has many older adults as well because it's been very clear that many individuals would benefit from some targeted instruction on um, the skills that this curriculum focuses on. And so it's been used successfully with a group of about 12 individuals in our community, and they love this curriculum. So if you want more information on it, I'm happy to scan in some pages and send it to you.
Excellent. And then the final question that I've seen here is, since goals have to be related to a student's learning and the impact of the deficit on their learning, how can you relate self-care tasks as an IEP goal and the impact on their learning?
Ooh. Well, I think that we talk about that through the lens of independence and
Mm,
wanting individuals to learn skills to be independent. And so that's how we've always written them in. Um, you can break some of those larger skills down into components, and you can write the goal through the lens of
mhm,
how you're going to teach it. So given a visual cue card or a checklist,
mhm.
someone will follow and complete tasks because the goal is independence. And so we haven't had any issues writing through that functional lens.
Mhm.
So I think there's lots of different ways that you can include many different skills into the
Good.
student's IEP.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Nikki. I don't think I've seen any other questions in chat to this point, so um, I think we'll call it there. So, for reference, everyone, you'll get an email with the next 24 hours or so asking for a survey for feedback on today's webinar and suggestions on any future topics you'd want covered in ATTA webinars. And keep an eye out for information on the autism conference coming up in April.
And register soon. Last I
Yes.
heard, we're close to we're over 50%, right? We're up there.
So this is the link to the conference as well as just for reference again, a link to the webinars where there'll be this recording will be is right here. Maybe. Nope. It,
Try
I'm
again.
struggling with technology today. My goodness.
And I
Okay.
just put the link to the folder where all of those resources are.
Okay. Well, thank you all so much for your giving us 5 extra minutes today. So we will call it there and have a good day. Bye bye.
Bye, everybody.